All right. We'll start with short introductions. I'm Harrison, uh, and I've been playing
Playing
Magic
Magic
for
for
about 8 years or so, since around Theros. And I've been playing Goblins, the modern mid-range
mid-range.
edition of Goblins iteration, for about a year and a half, I'd say. Um, and I'm hailing from New York.
Yeah, and I'm Jbrumbaugh. I have been playing Magic since 1998, and then I took a 10-year or so break. But before I took my break, I actually had played Goblin bidding in the standard environment back during the Mirrodin block. So uh, after I rejoined in the modern format a few years back, I recently picked up Goblins again when Snoop was printed, and that has been my go-to deck since then.
And I'm Zamggief. I've been playing this iteration of Goblins since about February. But I was a big Goblins fan. I used to have like an EDH Goblins deck back when it was, well, it's still bad, but I loved playing them even though I literally never won a single game. But I still played it for a long time. I when they printed Grumgully, I bought the modern deck, and then there just weren't any modern tournaments for like a year or so that I went to, and then obviously the lockdown. But here we are, finally playing Magic Online, and I've been streaming here this Goblins deck like thousands of matches, and just really figuring out what makes it tick. It's been good, and hopefully we're gonna get a little bit deeper into that today. Uh, but first, I think Harrison is going to give us a little background on the history of the Goblins and how it got to where it is right now. So why don't you take it away, Harrison?
So obviously, as Jbrumbaugh mentioned, there was a Goblin bidding deck back in the day, which I think was one of the first tribal Goblin decks that was viable. It was a very good deck. Um, and throughout the history of the archetype of goblins as a creature type, uh, most iterations have been somewhat aggressive. In modern, for a while, we had the 8 whack deck, which was very fast and tried to kill very quickly, but didn't have tools for uh, staying in the late game. But it was very fast. And in Legacy, we have kind of the flip side of that, where we had a very slow deck focused on card advantage and accruing value, denying resources like mana with cards like Rashad and Port and Wasteland. Um, and those are the two most well-known Goblin decks for a long time until around 2019 when we had Modern Horizons 1 bring us Munitions Expert, Sling Gang Lieutenant, Putrid Goblin, Pashlik Mons, and of course Goblin Matron. And then later we had Goblin Ringleader, and this spawned a uh, Legacy-esque mid-range deck. Lacked some of the more important mana denial elements, and also Goblin Lackey, which was definitely made it not as good. And that deck kind of stayed like that for a while until we got the printing of Grumgully the Generous, which enabled an infinite combo with Putrid Goblin and a sack outlet. Uh, and that kind of changed the deck for a while. And then in 2021, we had the printing of Snoop, which obviously has changed the deck a lot to basically revolve around the combo. And although you can win in a lot of different ways, there are many different angles that you can attack your opponent through. The combo is kind of always there and is usually taking up 11 to 12 deck slots at any given time. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves now. Modern Horizons 2 has pushed out a lot of the decks that we um, were previously good against, and we'll talk about that later. Talk about Goblin's place in the meta, but yeah.
Thank you. That was good. That was short and sweet. Now I think we mentioned a lot of cards there. Some of them make their way into what we would consider the stock or the core of this mid-range goblins list, and Jay is going to go through that now. Did you want to start with the mana or the combo package, Jay?
Yeah, I'll just run on through the list, starting with the mana, then the
Alright.
combo package, and the
Full
mid-range
mana.
package. Yeah, so for the mana package, so Ether Vial has been one of the most common inclusions in Goblins. Certainly, Ether Vial allows you to play creatures at instant speed. It allows you to cheat on mana. It allows you to react to removal by dropping in a goblin. So all kinds of nice tricks you can do with Ether Vial that work very well with the deck with 30 plus creatures and a nice curve. So that card, for obvious reason, has been a mainstay in Goblins for a long time in Modern. So and then Skirk Prospector has been kind of off and on in the mana package. When the Snoop package first came out, Skirk wasn't really used as much. There was a lot of people that were primarily trying to go all in on the combo and doing some interesting things like putting Dark Confidant in there and putting in a lot of Thought Seizes and cards like that to just jam in the combo and be totally focused on that. But since that time, since the deck has settled and evolved a little more, people started throwing in Skirk Prospector again as a nice outlet to basically ramp out huge threats, um, play certain cards that cost 4 or 5 mana earlier, or even as another tool in the combo. So certainly if you have infinite snoops out, then Skirk Prospector gives you infinite mana. So a lot of nice little advantages as Skirk Prospector. It's been a good one drop for quite some time. And then recently with Modern Horizons 2, we now have Ignoble Hierarch, and to me, that card has really transformed the deck a lot. So before you only had Skirk Prospector as your source of fast mana, but now you have an actual bona fide mana dork, and one that's a pretty good one because Noble Hierarch has really done a lot of good for other modern decks, and it's nice to have a card like that in Goblins. Certainly, the Exalted trigger comes up a lot. You can hold back a lot of your creatures, which is good for building up advantages with the Munitions Expert, making sure you have a high Goblin count, so you're only sending in your biggest boy to do your damage and just chip away at the life total. And then also having that green splash opens up the playbook to add other things like Masked Vandal, which can exile artifacts or enchantments, including Urza's Saga. So not a lot of nice utility that comes in from adding green off of that different color set. And all those colors are completely compatible with the standard Goblins builds. So then going into the combo package, Conspicuous Snoop. Obviously, this is the core of the deck. Setting up a lot of the combos is a lot easier if you have a lot of shuffle effects. So oftentimes you put in fetch lands or other effects like Pyre of Heroes to shuffle your deck a lot. Goblin Matron is oftentimes used also to shuffle your deck. So all kinds of ways to basically just manipulate the top of your library in order to get the exact card that you want in every key moment. So
Can we go through the combo real quick, just for people who
Yeah.
may have never seen it in action?
Yeah, so how the combo works is when Snoop is in play, you get to see the top card of your library, and if that top card is Kiki Jiki, and your Snoop does not have summoning sickness, then you can make infinite copies of Snoop since he has the ability of the goblin on top of the library. So as long as you have Kiki Jiki out and Snoop out, and Snoop doesn't have summoning sickness, you can make infinite copies. And the only way you can really intentionally get Kiki on top of your library is with Boggart Harbinger. So that's essentially the third piece of the combo, and helps make it a lot more consistent. So it's especially helped by the fact that you have Goblin Matron to tutor for either a Snoop or a Boggart Harbinger. And recently, with Pyre Heroes, you can do kind of the same thing. Just convert a 2 into a Boggart Harbinger and combo off, or convert a 1 into a Snoop and get your combo going that way. So a lot of nice ways you can set up the combo now. So Boggart Harbinger, though, you'll notice most lists run 4, but there's a few lists that run 3, and the reason for that is because on paper, Boggart Harbinger by itself is not a very strong Goblin card. it's primarily used just to set up the combo. It does have other uses, such as if you drop it in on Ether Vial before your draw, you get to draw that goblin. So it does have some other uses, but all in all, it's primarily used just to get you to combo off. And obviously, if you're trying to combo off on turn 3, then you want to have more Boggart Harbingers. If you have 2 or 1, that's not going to do very well in terms of trying to get that turn 3 combo. And so it depends on the focus of your deck, but currently right now in Modern, there's a lot of interaction. It is pretty challenging to get off that turn 3 combo, but nonetheless, you still get it off, and you still want to get that off. So redundancy is good in that regard. So
Yeah.
the rest of the combo package, you have Sling Gang Lieutenant. So after you make your infinite snoops, then the last untapped snoop copies Boggart Harbinger, puts Sling Gang Lieutenant on top, and then Sling Gang Lieutenant can then sacrifice all those snoop copies to then completely drain your opponent's life total. And one of the really sweet things about it is it's an activated ability at instant speed. So it doesn't matter what your opponent has out, as long as you have infinite snoops and Sling Gang, then you have basically won the game. So even if they have something that's letting them gain life when creatures enter the battlefield, doesn't matter. All your stuff can, you can use all your abilities with all their triggers on the stack. So it's a huge advantage, and it's pretty solid combo.
Yeah, that is a really great part of it. Just there's a lot of people who think they're safe from the combo when they get something like the Soul Sisters into play, or Yak Champion, and leave all their life game triggers on the stack, or they try and kill your kill something at an awkward time, and you just do all this in response. And yeah, Sling Gang is like the last piece of that lets you do it right then and there, no matter when then is. But there's one last piece of the combo that I think gets forgotten about, because like we want to end it with Sling Gang because it's so clean, infinite life, infinite damage right then and there. But you know, sometimes people bring in Leyline of the Void or Witchbane Orb, or not Leyline of the Void, excuse me, Leyline of Sanctity or Witchbane Orb, and then you can't target them with Sling Gang Lieutenant. But you can still just like attack with your infinite snoops by making them at your opponent's end step. Just because Kiki Jiki tokens have that neat thing where they don't sacrifice until the beginning of the next end step. So if you make them in the end step, they get to untap on your turn, and then you can swing with those and get past any of those awkward hexproof effects. Or maybe you just drew all your Sling Gangs, or they got surgically extracted or something. There's ways around that. But then you mentioned earlier the consistency that Matron brings to the table. So we're just gonna, if you want to talk about all the rest of the goblins, that would be good.
Yeah, let's talk about the mid-range package.
Yeah.
Let's see. So next, you have another screen of that one?
I got the slide pulled up. We got Munitions Expert, Mog War Marshal, Matron, Ringleader, and then all these fun one-ofs underneath here.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to start, I don't know, whatever you think is the most important.
Okay. All right, that popped up. All right, yeah. So I'll start with the Munitions Expert. So Munitions Expert is basically our best removal that we have, and it's a great turn 2 play off of a turn 1 Skirk Prospector or Noble Hierarch. Sometimes it's just easy to drop it and then take out a creature with 1 toughness, such as Ragavan, which has been a huge plague on the meta right now. So it's nice having that solid 2-drop that can sweep up and take care of any of these 1 toughness creatures that are really prevalent in Modern right now. And it can also flash in, which is the other nice thing. So you can do stuff like they attack, and you can block and use its effects. So you can add in an extra damage that way if you need to. So all kinds of nice utility with Munitions Expert. But on the other hand, if your opponent sees you holding up black and red, then it might be pretty obvious that you're going to drop in a Munitions Expert. So there's also that to consider. So because of that, you might sometimes want to play Munitions Expert on your own turn while they're tapped out or can't respond to it. Bog War Marshal, he's obviously really good as well, kind of a filler role. Gives you extra bodies to power up your other goblins like Munitions Expert Or with Goblin Chieftain, you have suddenly 4 power on the battlefield, and one that will die and come back as another dude. And Goblin Trash Master, you have 3 goblins now that can destroy an artifact. Flashlight Mons, you have basically 3 damage off of that Mog War Marshal. So all kinds of nice utility from that single goblin that doesn't really seem to do much on paper, but when you combine it with all your other goblins, he really packs quite a big punch. And also don't forget that with Skirk Prospector, you basically have your own Desperate Ritual in the deck as well. So that also comes in handy.
Yeah, another couple things to note, especially about Munitions Expert, is that the amount of damage. So Munitions Expert does an amount of damage equal to the number of goblins you control, but that effect is checked when the ability actually resolves. So even if you have 3 goblins and you cast Munitions Expert, targeting a 3 tough if you have 3 goblins on the field and then you cast Munitions Expert, targeting a 4 toughness creature your opponent controls, but then they kill one of your goblins in response, now your Munitions Expert ability is only dealing 3 damage. So that's important to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you respond to a Munitions Expert with a Munitions Expert, they'll each count each other. So you can get a few extra points of damage that way.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
pretty neat. It's been a struggle with what you're talking about, that it checks on resolution recently because so many decks are packing so much interaction. So if you're targeting that Dragon's Rage Channeler and you have Mog War Marshal out and then you curve into Munitions Expert or keep 2 lands and do that, you can kind of get blown out. So yeah, picking your spots like Jay was mentioning before is really important.
Yeah.
But I still feel like when you're on that mid-range plan, it's still like mostly what you're searching up with Matron. But I guess we haven't even talked about Matron. So if you want to just talk about Matron first.
Yeah, so that does dovetail in pretty nicely with Goblin Matron. So Matron obviously is another piece of the glue that holds the deck together. Certainly, you have a lot of unique goblins in the deck that do a lot of different things, and even though Matron costs a lot of mana for just a 1/1, being able to tutor for the exact goblin you need in every situation is absolutely important. So because of that, you want to try and focus on setting up your Ether Vial to 3, so that way you can just drop in a Matron, tutor for the goblin you need at an instant moment, and then use it. So that's one nice little play there. Other times you can actually use Pyre Heroes, for example, to convert a Munitions Expert over to a Matron and search for the specific goblin that you need. Or you can use something like Unearth when Matron is in the graveyard, and then immediately it's 1 black mana to tutor for any goblin that you need. So a lot of nice utility off of that 1/3 mana 1/1 body. So it's quite vital in the deck. So next is the Goblin Ringleader. Ringleader, obviously it helps refill your hand, and you want to maximize the number of goblins in your deck. So if you're playing Ringleader, you probably want at least 30 goblins in your deck, and certainly more is better with the Ringleader. One of the real weaknesses of Ringleader is after you sideboard, you need to bring in all these Blood Moons and other cards that help you with your matches. Well, then you have fewer goblins, and Ringleader can sometimes then pull in 1 goblin or can whiff entirely. So that's one thing to be careful of with Ringleader, is that its effectiveness gets diluted in Game 2 and Game 3 in general when you're bringing in all these non-goblin sideboard cards. But still, Ringleader is still important for just refilling your hand, because eventually, in more longer, grindier games, you are going to need to refill that hand to get the edge over your opponent. But certainly, an argument can be made with Modern Horizons 2 with how fast the game is right now, that Ringleader might be a bit too slow to set up. So because of that, we're seeing fewer Ringleaders in decks now, it seems. But still, you can maybe try and get there with the right ramp, and certainly having the Ignoble Hierarch and Ether Vial are helpful to do that. So
yeah, and we don't need to go
still,
through all of these fun-ups necessarily. We mentioned them a lot, but I think one of the most important ones, I mean, we have lords here that reduce cost, and we have lords here that give +1/+1 and haste on both of them. But I think Pashlik Mons is the most unique one, so I'm gonna blow that up for people so we can like just kind of see it
Sure.
big and maybe talk about like the utility that Pashlik Mons brings to the deck.
Yeah, yeah. So Pashlik Mons is I played with Pashlik Mons in my first modern tournament. Thought, oh, he didn't really do a lot, and I took him out. And then after a few other tournaments, I put him back in, and I've been really happy with him since then. My main problem I had with him initially is he's just 3 mana 2/2, and if he dies, he just deals 1 damage or something, big whoop. But if you're able to keep him around, then his abilities become really nice because you can do stuff such as just take any vanilla 1/1 goblin token and you can block with it, and then you can sacrifice it to make 2 new 1/1 goblin tokens, and on top of that, you get to ping something. So he is absolutely stellar on defense if your opponent lacks removal or if they've used it all up on Snoop or other cards in your deck. So don't sleep on that goblin. It does
Yeah.
a lot for your deck. And the other thing too is if you try to combo off, but you don't have a way to set up the traditional combo with Sling Gang, you can actually do something if you have a Skirk out, which is bring that guy out, the Pashlik Mons, with infinite mana, and then sacrifice your infinite Snoops and deal infinite damage. So that's another alternative way to get a combo win if you don't have your Sling Gangs anymore.
Yeah,
So,
that comes up more often than you'd think, but yeah, it's a useful little thing that you can do, and like you said, he'll just take over the game. You mentioned, I mean, we don't have every goblin here, you know, that you could possibly play. You could do, you know, the Gatherer search for just goblins that are legal in Modern, and get a really long list. You know, obviously we left out Krenko, which a lot of people used to play. But I
Yeah.
think that brings us more to like how you want to build your 75 for you know, for whatever you expect to see or however you want to play the game. So I think this is the perfect time to transition to like this list highlighting section that we're gonna do. Hello everyone. So we've got right now what I think we've all agreed is sort of like a really stock version. I mean, based on the slides we have and just, you know, history. This is Ganja Djanga's list. He's a, I believe, Brazilian streamer, player, plays all the time. He's got a very classic take on goblins. You can see he's got 4 ignoble hierarchs. He doesn't happen to be playing any Skirk prospectors here, but he's got Snoops, Mog War Marshals, 4 Aether Vials. He plays a main deck Trashmaster for whatever reason in this particular league that he 5-0'd. And this is more or less a stock list. You could remove, you know, 1 Mog War Marshal and put in a Skirk Prospector. But there's a lot going on here that is basic but powerful. Just you can see he chose to stick on 4 Goblin Ringleaders, and as Jay alluded to earlier, a lot of us are kind of pulling away from that just because the format is starting to speed up. But we're gonna there's we keep talking about the format, and the question obviously on everybody's mind is why would you play goblins other than the fact that you like goblins, right? What are we good against? How do the matchups play out when you have a stock list like this, like we see here from Ganja? So Jund, the color combination that we are in, black, red, green, it is one of the grindiest color combinations there is. It has its own verb. You Jund people out. It really just means you're trading resources, grinding out wins over close games, and killing creatures and playing creatures of your own, and just kind of overwhelming people with value. Like that's sort of the heart and soul of the color combo. And Goblins is no different, except that we have the conspicuous Snoop combo in it. So you take a matchup that used to be awful, which is combo matchups for Jund. Like they usually play or other Jund style decks usually play discard effects, and you just can't control the top of your opponent's deck. So sometimes you get comboed, and you're trying to interact with creatures, so you just get comboed by spells too. Here we can race other combo decks easily because we have the turn 3 combo and they're not playing much interaction, just because they're very linearly focused. So it's sort of this mid-range grindy control deck that has a combo finish just baked into it. A lot like Splinter Twin. You'll hear a lot of people say that. Aether Vial gives you that, flash in Deceiver Exarch, play Kiki Jiki type gameplay that everybody is used to from Splinter Twin. But that's sort of what we've got here. So against other decks, other Jund type decks, other mid-range type decks, classically, we would beat them with card advantage from Ringleader and blockers in the terms of, in the form of Mog War Marshal, Munitions Expert, Snoop. You don't want to block with him, but when your opponent plays a turn 1 Goblin Guide and you get to play turn 2 Snoop and hopefully block, as long as you're not dead, that's really the goal, right? So a lot of our combo pieces and redundancy effects kind of do double duty in a lot of these matchups, just to gum up the board and block forever and buy us enough time to overwhelm people with just endless waves of goblins. So that's basically what this list is doing, and it's why I would recommend it. Now, as far as after Modern Horizons 2, a lot has changed, and a lot of people have started to adjust this list. Obviously, it's still possible to be successful with this. This is a 5-0 from September 21st, just a week or two ago. So it's still possible to be successful against some portion of the meta, but the meta has shifted to the point where mid-range decks super low to the ground with these new Modern Horizons 2 red cards like Dragon's Rage Channeler and Monkey, and Unholy Heat, which they don't need to turn on for it to kill everything in our deck. So it's like these decks, they interact with us really cleanly and efficiently, and we're kind of struggling to keep up and stabilize to get our ringleaders down against those types of decks. Then there's the Lurrus decks, which you should definitely be prepared for. We have good matchups against Lurrus decks because we have ways to remove Lurrus, and in the sideboard here we even have things like Tarfire that will that you can tutor up with your Goblin Matron, even because it's a tribal goblin, to kill Lurrus in that way. So you don't need your a board full of goblins. And then I think the real boogeyman for us in the current meta, and it's why people are adjusting, or well, I guess it's so bad that some people choose not to adjust, but the real boogeyman is these Cascade decks, Rhinos and Living End. Living End we have an easy time against, but there's the Teamer Rhinos decks where they kind of just they smush us pretty badly. We'll get into that with some of our lists later and some of our sideboard choices. And then I guess I didn't mention one of the other elephants in the room, Urza Saga, the land. And there's a lot of sideboard cards that go into fighting that as well, but we generally just combo past all of the Urza Saga decks. We can generally interact well enough with most of the Lurrus decks that are just, basic value, but it's things like Dragon's Rage Channeler or Turn 1 Monkey or even Murktide Regent that we struggle with, like the bigger creatures that we have a hard time removing. So this is Ganja's list, which is like a very classic take on it. I think the next closest thing to this, because we're just kind of like, we're gonna slowly branch off from this and see how people have adjusted. I think Harrison's list is the next closest, and it has an interesting the right one? Yes, it is. An interesting card in it in Grist the Hungering Tide. So do you wanna talk about that for a second, Harrison? Why you've included that?
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I stole this one from you, Zam.
Oh.
Um, uh, I watched a stream of yours, and I saw the role that it filled in not only accruing like value over a lot of time, but also just uh providing an additional angle of attack that Goblins has not traditionally been able to use, because there aren't really, like, planeswalkers don't really work well in Goblins. It's not not generally compatible, and so we're already in green black because of Ignoble. And so uh, as I understand it, you tried this out to fill a hole in the meta where Munitions Expert is good and can remove a lot of threats, but for cards that are sizable like Murktide Regent and aren't able to be removed by things like Fatal Push, which we traditionally run in the side, which a lot of people traditionally run in the sideboard. We don't really have an answer for a giant flyer, and Grist provides that with its -2 ability, which allows it to destroy target creature. And on top of that, it provides us more use for our cards that aren't they're good early game. Mogwar Marshal is good at establishing a board presence. It's good with Munitions Expert, but once they've entered, they're just 1/1s. They're just sitting there. We don't really have a use for them. And so now that we have a card that could just cycle through these stupid like 1/1s with good ETBs that are good in the deck when they enter, but once they're on the board, they're kind of just sitting there. It's provided a new use for them.
Yeah, so you claimed you stole it from me, and it's funny because I feel like I stole it from Canister, and in a really weird roundabout way. There's other people that are building Jund decks that are including Grist, but Canister recently had a lot of success with Elementals, which is sort of like a cousin of the Goblins deck. And for a while, we were just like the better tribal deck. And Modern Horizons 2 came around, and it printed all of those evoke elementals into the deck, and it changed the whole face of it to the point where they removed Aether Vial from their deck, and they replaced it with just value planeswalkers and ramp. Now they use Utopia Sprawl, which we could use, but we have this on-tribe goblin in the form of Ignoble Hierarch. So I figured we would try to leverage the same type of thing, planeswalkers that start accruing value and can take over the game on their own, because I mean, let's be honest, like the 1/1s that Grist makes aren't that scary, but we're mostly playing 1/1s already anyway, and if our deck is built to survive in that kind of environment, this is probably going to fit right in, right? So I think by leveraging this Ignoble Hierarch to give us a really powerful turn 2 play that could take over the game that wasn't Snoop, you just become that much more deadly, right? So before you stick an Ignoble Hierarch, and everybody has like totally set, like everybody agrees that Ignoble Hierarch is fantastic to include, but our turn 2 3-drops are like kind of anemic, right? They are Boggart Harbinger, which we've said earlier is probably not the best if you're not comboing. It makes sure that you're not going to draw land, which in some cases is good, but on turn 2 is probably not even the most desirable thing half the time, at least. And then there's Goblin Matron, which, while it's good and it can search you what you need, you maybe don't know what you need on turn 2 yet, right? So Grist just gives us something else to play on turn 2 with our Ignoble, and there's just more hands that look good. We have Ignoble and Grist. Now, Ignoble's hard to get to stick, but when it does, and you get out ahead with Grist, it's gonna feel really good. But enough about Grist. There's another card in here which we've mentioned a couple times, which is Pyre of Heroes. I'm just gonna actually read Pyre of Heroes really quickly for people who don't know it. It's Birthing Pod, but fixed. It's like a tribal Birthing Pod. So Pyre of Heroes is 2-cost artifact. And then for 2, tapping and sacrificing a creature, you search your library for a creature that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Put it onto the battlefield, and you can only do it at sorcery speed. So that's an important part. I know a lot of people miss that because it's at the end after this big wall of text. But it's a tribal birthing pod. You sack a creature, you go 1 up on the mana curve. And Goblins is obviously a tribal deck. So tell us more about like what you like Pyre of Heroes for and like how you find it being useful.
As I mentioned before, we have a lot of cards with very good ETBs: Matron, Goblin Matron, Goblin Ringleader, Munitions Expert, Mog War Marshal. But once they're down, there are just 1/1s or 2/2s. They aren't very good, and they kind of just sit there. So what Pyre does is it allows you to you play your Matron, right? You search for whatever Snoop or Bogger Harbinger or Goblin Ringleader, but now you just have a 1/1 sitting on the battlefield. But what Pyre lets you do is cash in that stupid 1/1 that's just sitting there, and it doesn't really do anything except for count towards your goblin count for things like Munitions Expert. Now we can cash that in for a more valuable card, such as such as Goblin Ringleader, or Slinging Lieutenant. And once we get to those that 4 slot, and we can start searching for Kiki Jiki. That's one aspect that's often overlooked, is how good Kiki Jiki is just as a creature. It's obviously very situational, and you don't want to see it in your opener. And it's often like kind of a mulligan unto itself, having Kiki Jiki in your opener. But if you draw them late game in a board stall, when you have a Munitions Expert out, or a Ringleader out, or a Slinging Lieutenant out, you can really take over games that way.
Yeah, it's just endless value. And so I know Ganja recently, we just going back to his stock list, he has a new list where he plays 4 Pyre of Hero. It's the first he's testing it, so he's really excited. When Pyre first came out, we all tested it. I started with 4 myself. This was back before Ignoble was even in the deck. It's a great card. It's endless amounts of value. It gives you the endless chain of matrons and experts. Like, you use your matron to search for Munitions Expert, you play Munitions Expert, you Pyre the Munitions Expert away into another matron to get another Munitions Expert. You do that over and over again until you run out. So it's a great way to just like take over a board with endless value, but every copy after the first one you draw is pretty bad, and it's a pretty expensive card, even though it looks like it sits low on your curve. Kind of costs 4 mana to activate, sort of like another Ringleader in that respect, and it looks almost like you removed 1 Ringleader for 1 Pyre, because I see you're wanting just 3 Goblin Ringleaders here as opposed to 4 that Ganja one. Maybe that's like not the math you did in your head, but that's a good way to think about it for a lot of people, that it's sort of like more copies of Ringleader. So you want to be careful about that with your curve, and here you're playing just 1. Do you want to talk about your sideboard? Because I mean, you have what looks like a pretty standard-ish sideboard, but there's an interesting card that Jay's been talking about a couple times in Patriarch's bidding, and we're going to see his list right after this. But if you want to tell us like what you bring, what matchups you bring these types of things in for.
Yeah, totally. I'll go through each card. Fatal Push, obviously, is mainly there because of Monkey and the incredible advantage it gets if it's able to connect on turn 2. So having that there, as well as Tarfire, to remove those important early game threats, is incredibly important. So that's kind of my removal there. Warren Weirding is mainly there for Tron. There's a lot of Tron running around my meta, and it's very good if your opponent's playing just one very very large creature. It can be good, and also has some utility. You can actually sack your own creatures to it, which doesn't come up a lot, but does have its uses. And those goblin tokens that it creates have haste, which is another important thing to know. Relic of Progenitus is what I'm using as graveyard hate. So that's for I know Dredge isn't very popular now, but turning off Delirium is important. and also for decks like Living End, which are also running around. Anything it's looking to recur. The Esper Reanimator deck it's also relevant there. So yeah. Thoughtseize also for Tron. Same with Crater Maker. Thoughtseize is also good against Living End, like I said, and also other combo decks. Masked Vandal also have weirdly a lot of Stoneforge decks. Hammer Time, and there's some very if your opponent is able to stick a what is it called?
Caldra? Is that the one you're looking
Caldra.
for? Yeah.
You really can't win unless you're comboing as soon as they play it.
Yep.
There's almost nothing you can do because creatures can't block it. It's going to lifelink, so you can't really win with a more aggressive plan. You're done. So having an out for that is good, as well as being able to. I've had some situations where I've been able to just loop it with Kiki-Jiki, as I mentioned before. And although it does have a condition of exiling a creature card from your graveyard, that is pretty easy to fulfill.
Yeah, by the time it becomes relevant. It's I know a lot of people, they look at this card and they look at it as an answer to Urza Saga because it does kill enchantments, it exiles enchantments. Normally you can't hit Urza Saga specifically with it because it's too early in the game. Something probably hasn't died yet. But for the things that it's useful against, things like Caldra or just big old Tron threats, by then something is dead. And for those who missed it, it's a green card. There's not a lot of green goblins out there, not useful ones. This one is actually not even a goblin, but it is a shapeshifter with changeling. So you can tutor this up off Matron. You can find it off of Ringleader, and you can even pirate away. And in this list that we're talking about, you can actually even pirate away into Grist the Hunger Tide because Grist is an insect when it's vibrant. A neat little thing that you can do. But the last two cards, Fury, which is a new Evoke Elemental, kind of obvious, like, sure, it's a board wipe, but Patriarch Spinning, what kind of matchups do you bring that in for?
Anything where obviously people don't traditionally board in Graveyard Hay because that's not an angle that the deck typically attacks on, although some people are playing Unearth now, so they might be a little less relevant. But it's very good against any kind of grindy matchup where at some point your opponent's going to tap out, possibly play a board wipe, wipe your board. Anything where you're having a lot of creatures dies. I've had games where there have been 15 plus creatures in my graveyard, and getting to and because there's just so much removal flying, it's bad against. I'd say it's bad against like blue-white control. I think I boarded in once again there, which was kind of a trap because it is going to get countered a lot of the time. You're not often going to be able to just play a giant spell like that unless your opponent's really desperate. But yeah, just the ability to like all those losses and creatures that have died over the course of the game, just to bring them all back at once, is pretty invaluable.
So are you bringing it in against like these Ragavan Saga type decks, like Blue Red Murktide? They call it Zoomerjund, things like that.
Yes, most of the time, yeah. It depends. If you're on the play, I think that actually does play a role for me at least. If I'm on the play, I'll definitely board in. But if I'm on the draw, it's kind of a toss up depending on what kind of build they're playing.
Yeah.
And if I'm worried that they're gonna, yeah, it kind of depends on what I've seen game one and what kind of DRC Ragavan deck they're playing.
Yeah, it's tough getting up to 5 mana. Something we haven't highlighted yet, and we haven't mentioned it, is the mana base. I see here that you have 4 unclaimed territories and
Oh yeah.
and no Cavern of Souls. I'm assuming that this is like a budget.
Yeah. So this this is the cards the lands that are on screen right now isn't even my real mana base.
Oh.
My real mana base is so bad. It's like
Okay.
They're like 10 of duels. It's
Okay. That's
pretty
funny.
awful, and I didn't really want to put that all there.
No, I
So this is like
understand.
reasonably what I'm building to. I
Yeah.
eventually want to get caverns and replace my unclaimed territories with those.
Yeah.
But
There's a lot of
yeah,
ways
the
to
the
build a
mana
deck.
base, it's funny because as you can see from this, discounting Ether Vial, which even now isn't a given because a lot of people started playing Unearth.
Yeah.
Discounting Ether Vial, you're playing like a $70 deck apart from the land
Right.
base.
Yeah.
It's so cheap if you can scrounge out yeah, if without the mana base, which is really frustrating because
It is for sure.
yeah, it's a fun deck, and I think it falls in the modern trap of having just a really expensive mana base.
If you were to not be Jund, just like to harp on that point for a minute, like if you're not playing Grist and Ignoble, like you can really get away with like just a black red version of this deck with an incredibly cheap mana base. Like you can run mountains and swamps and
Oh
the
yeah,
double faced cards, and you can really go a long way with it because most of the power is in just the consistency, and you don't need a ton of fancy lands to really get there. But once you start splashing a third color, then your consistency goes way down unless you do, you know, get those lands. So it's definitely possible to do it both ways. But yeah, you keep mentioning Unearth, so I feel like we should pull up a list that has Unearth in it, just to do that. I think we're gonna start with, is this, where is the, okay, well, we talked about bidding actually. This one, let's start with bidding, just to stay on that string, because that was in your sideboard, and here we see Jbrumbaugh has it in his main deck, and he's got two thoughts. He moved a couple of your sideboard cards just straight into the main. So Jay, you want to talk us through like why you made those decisions, what your goal is with this deck, and like who you're trying to beat with it?
Yeah, certainly. So when Modern Horizons 2 initially came out and I was trying to build a new spin on Goblins with the new printed cards, I immediately saw Patriarch's Bidding as a card that I just absolutely loved in Standard and was really excited to see that printed into Modern with Modern Horizons 2. And so those who played with Patriarch's Bidding, I don't know if anyone here has played with the classic standard deck, but basically, as long as you have a lot of goblins in your graveyard, you can be losing the game absolutely terribly. And as long as you top deck that Patriarch's Bidding, you basically win the game on the spot.
Yep.
So it's just that incredibly powerful swingy card that suddenly goes from, well, it looks like you have no way of winning to all of a sudden, all right, well, I just won the game. And certainly the new goblins that we have with Slinging Lieutenant versus what we had in Standard allows you to immediately win on the spot when you resolve that spell. So this particular build, I had actually increased the number of Slingings versus the Standard build up to 3 to have more sack outlets to work with Patriarch's Bidding. I also had 2 Skirk Prospectors. I know some builds have cut that down to 1, but I basically focused a lot more on the sack outlets in this deck to basically fill the graveyard as needed when Patriarch's Bidding comes up. And as for the other weaknesses described earlier of, well, so I can just counter it, that's also where the utility comes with Thoughtseize. So if I play a Thoughtseize and I remove their only way of stopping Patriarch's Bidding, then that means I can follow up with the bidding and win against those control matchups with that 5-mana card. So that actually is a factor, considering Patriarch's Baiting does cost 5 mana. It can be countered, but there are other support cards in the deck to make it to where Patriarch's Baiting is going to resolve every time you cast it.
Yeah.
So, um, and then that's also another spot where Pyre of Heroes comes in. So, Pyre of Heroes, obviously, it has a lot of great utility, as was previously discussed. But on top of that, with Patriarch's Bidding, all those goblins that you sacrificed can now go back onto the battlefield and makes Patriarch's Bidding even more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, this whole deck is around Patriarch's Bidding in a way. It's kind of focused in on it to make Patriarch's Bidding as powerful as possible. And because it's a 5-mana card, it is expensive. I actually withheld Ether Vial in this particular build, and same Fire Heroes. It was also a very mana intensive card, so this build focuses more on the fast mana with Skirk Prospector and Ignoble Hierarch to churn out those cards a lot earlier in the game. So oftentimes I find myself with the mana for Patriarch's Bidding, but I don't always have the goblins I need to win yet.
Right.
But getting the mana for Patriarch's Bidding has been pretty easy with this deck.
Is there a set of decks that you would say this performs better against compared to, you know, a more standard build? Like, is there a problem that Patriarch's Bidding solves?
Yeah, absolutely. So the decks that I find this deck does extremely well in are those control matchups. So blue-white control obviously is packed with tons of counter spells, but it has enough threats that they have to answer with Pyre Heroes. I had one game I literally played where blue-white control countered Pyre Heroes. The next turn I played Patriarch's Bidding and won the game. Another game, blue-white control, I cast Thoughtseize, remove their counterspell, cast Patriarch's Bidding, win the game. So this deck is basically built with a lot of redundancy in order to work around answers that control decks would typically have to a big card like that.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're still threatening them with your standard Snoop combo.
Right.
And you're still trying to find other ways, and you can still try and beat them down by just overrunning them with a lot of goblins and then drain them out with Slinging. Especially because there's 3 Slinglings in this deck, that line of play actually opens up more, where you're just putting enough chip damage and you just drain them out.
Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of ways to win with this deck, and it's pretty flexible, so that makes it, I think, a better build for metas where you have a lot of control decks or more grindy decks. Where I've seen this deck struggle is those modern games that are just super fast. So if you're dealing with Timber Rhinos, for example, or Cascade, so Cascade, even living in, can be a little bit of a tricky matchup because you don't have a lot of goblins in play when they cast Living End, and sometimes you can't get to 5 mana because of how fast their deck gets to Living End. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, and then also Living End also plays Grief, which discards. They get to pick a card in your hand to remove. So oftentimes that's Patriarch's Bidding. So that makes that matchup a little more difficult compared to what regular goblins would have. But it's really great in control matchups. It's really great in more mid-range grinding matchups.
Yeah.
But it does have its struggles with the really fast decks or decks that just disrupt your hand with Grief, for example.
Yeah, and
So the sideboard is kind of built to answer some of those problem decks. So Engineered Explosives is really great at removing all of those Rhino tokens that are very problematic for the deck. So that's one very important sideboard card. Certainly, it also answers Hammer Time, and a lot of decks you'll find in the meta are Hammer Time or Rhinos. So that's probably about a good 25% of your meta right there being answered by that one card.
Yep.
The next card, Alpine Moon, I actually have recently discovered since Modern Horizons 2 that is very good at answering Urza's Saga. You plop that down, that is basically 1 mana Stone Rain. It's very powerful, and I think it's a very necessary card in the current meta because of how much Urza's Saga there is. And it also does have uses too against Tron. You lay Alpine Moon, well, Tron can't get its Tron piece out.
Yep.
Same with Prime Time. You can use Prime Time to also take care of Valakut, so that way that doesn't kill you. So lots of little uses for that Alpine Moon. Depending on your mana, you may or may not want it, depending on what you see. Fatal Push, I just like having that in the deck because it's a flexible 1 mana instant speed removal. It saved my butt a lot of times. For example, playing against Hardened Scales, someone just sacrificed all their pieces into an 11/11 flying creature they can't block. Well, here comes Fatal Push to ruin their day. So it's a nice flexible card. Also, it kills Lurrus because, I mean, you're probably losing permanents anyway. So it's got a lot of versatility, and I just like having it in my sideboard. Spell Bomb. So actually kind of a split you're between 3 Ley Lines of the Void and 1 Nihil Spellbomb. So the reason why I'm running Nihil Spellbomb in this particular deck is because I don't want to exile my own graveyard with a Relic of
like
Genesis. So that, I think, is pretty much on the same level as that one card, except it doesn't nuke your own graveyard. So, and also another little factor about it is if you don't have any mana and you just absolutely have to get rid of the graveyard at that moment, you can just tap and sacrifice it, and you don't have to leave mana up to use it, even though you don't pay the black and get the card. So it has that one little extra piece of extra usage that sometimes is overlooked by your opponent. And then I also threw an extra Thoughtseize in there just to add more hand disruption. Mask Vandal, we already talked about that card. Blood Moon, that is obviously a very powerful prison piece for goblins that does a lot of work, actually, even against rhinos. You think, well, they have a lot of red mana, but on the other hand, all their Cascade cards are 2-color cards. And if you time that Blood Moon just right, if you look at this deck, it has 6 total accelerants. It has 4 Noble Hybrids, 2 Skirk Prospectors, so you can land a turn 2 Blood Moon and really ruin their day. Blood Moon also works just the same against Urza's Saga. It'll blow up all the sagas. And also it knocks out Tron pretty good. And Elementals is another deck that's really come on strong recently. They don't use Ether Vial anymore. If you land a Blood Moon, they basically cannot cast any of the cards in their deck except if they have a red elemental and that's it. So it's
Although
a very
I've
powerful
lost to
card.
that hard cast Fury.
Debate between 3 and 2, but I have 2 in this particular sideboard. Necromentia is a really fun card I really like. So again, taking advantage of the mana acceleration with the Noble Hierarch and Skirk Prospector. And also I didn't talk about this earlier, but with my mana base, I've got a card in here called Graven Cairns. So that makes any red mana into double black. So because of that, I'm actually able to use something like a Skirk Prospector, and all of a sudden I have 2 black mana to cast a lot of these really strong black sideboard cards. So going back to Necromentia, if I land that on turn 2, I can eliminate all the rhinos in the person's deck. I can eliminate all the living ends in someone's deck. All these really powerful combo decks that just rely on one card to win the game, Necromentia does a lot of work. And also another thing that's a little overlooked on it is you can name non-basic lands. So you can even use it against Tron, take out their Tron piece, and you basically won the game that way too, because then they can't assemble Tron. So a lot of flexibility and versatility with that card. I just really love it. I think it's really great in this deck.
Yeah, it is neat. And would you say that this is a split? The 2 Blood Moon, 1 Necromentia split? I see, because a lot of people play 3 Blood Moons against, because it does, you know, it operates in a lot of the same matchups you were talking about.
Yeah, and I've even seen Necromentia pop up in other sideboards too since Modern Horizons 2. A lot of people kind of notice it's a pretty strong card with a lot of these really broken combo decks.
Yeah, for
Cascade. Sure. Crippling Fear is the next card I like. I got really excited about that when Kaldheim came out, and it doesn't seem like it does a whole lot on the surface because, well, it doesn't kill any creatures with 4 toughness, but there are just some decks, like Elves, for example, that are just flooding the board with all these really fast creatures just snowball. Crippling Fear is just one card that just wipes them all out immediately. And I've even found uses with it against Elementals. A lot of their Elementals are pretty cheap. Risen Reef is a 1/1. They've got a lot of 2/2 Elementals in the deck, a lot of 1/2 Elementals. The only thing it doesn't really eliminate is they got 2 Elementals that it does not take care of. One is Omnath, and then the other one is Endurance. But besides those 2 cards, Crippling Fear wipes their board, so it does a good amount of damage to Elementals and kind of helps you turn the corner, I found. Next card I want to talk about is Culling Ritual. So actually, this is a recent discovery. Certainly, you know, Rhinos, that's a lot of cheap permanents. You cast that, and you get a lot of black and green mana along the way, so you'll notice this deck runs Patriarch Bidding. Well, all that black mana can immediately go into Bidding, and you can immediately swing the board a huge amount doing that. Also, Boggart Harbingers, Sling Gangs, all those things will come out just right away. And if you have a Skirk Prospector out, well, sack it for a red first, and then you can cast a lot of Goblins just right there. So, really nice card. It's a And also because this deck doesn't run Ether Vial, it's not
Yeah.
as much of a liability to use a card like that. So that's why that's in there. And then, yeah, I already talked about Leyline of the Void. You want to some decks like Living, and you want to mulligan every single time until you find that Leyline
Yeah.
or Nihil Spellbound that at least buy you time until you can cast it. So I've
Yeah.
taken this deck to 2 tournaments since Modern Horizons 2 has come out. First one was an 80-person tournament. I piloted to 8th place in a tournament. I was pretty happy with it. Then I took it to another Modern Horizons 2 tournament that had about 38 people or so. It was it also did pretty good in that one, and I piloted it to a top 4 finish. So I've been pretty happy with the
Nice.
deck pretty early on, and then I took it in paper format to Friday Night Magic. Immediately got a 3-0. I was really happy with it, but then since then I played it a few more times in paper and then didn't do as well. I actually came away with 2 losing records the last 2 times I played on paper. So the problem I've identified with it is basically Modern has now evolved to a point where it's all about that speed, and these games are just ending super fast. Or we have my meta has a lot of Loris Dress Down. Dress Down
Yeah.
is really bad for our deck, and a lot of our creatures with ETBs just get completely negated by Dress Down. So with Loris, that just loops every single turn, and then on top of that, playing Death Shadow, which if you don't block it, you can take 13 damage. So there's some really scary stuff out there right now that basically I'm angling at more of a Grist type, Grist Unearth type build in the future for my next tournament because of how much Modern has gotten faster. But if they ban a few cards, if Modern slows down, I'm probably going to go back to this deck.
So let's pull well, so this is your version of the Grist Unearth package, but let's I just want to unpack a couple of the things you said about Modern being really fast. And like the speed of it coming way down, because the last 2 lists we're going to talk about as far as Goblins goes are this list of yours and mine, which are pretty similar. But another reason that bidding list might be performing a little worse too, there's a ton of graveyard decks in the last 2 weeks that have popped up. There's the new Jeskai Phoenix deck. Living End is making a resurgence, at least online, because Gab Nassif won with it. And then the Esper Reanimator, like you mentioned, there's a new Innistrad card that's like it's Faithful Mending, which is basically a 2-mana Faithless Looting that has powered that deck up slightly. All the decks mentioned, actually, other than Living End. So people are a little bit more prepared for their graveyard, at least right now, and, that kind of ebbs and flows, as it always does in Eternal formats, where people, some weekends Dredge can win because people didn't show up with 3 Leyline of the Void in their sideboard. But right now, us included, we're coming prepared with that. So the speed portion of it, other than the graveyard, I think that's really important to touch on, because here's my list. We're just gonna start talking about this one off the bat because I think it's a little bit simpler, and yours is almost like a further step down the line from this one. We mentioned earlier that Aether Vial was a core part of the deck, and here we are. Our last 2 lists don't have Aether Vial in them, and this one even is not even like going all in on bidding, and like there's reasons to remove it. It just straight up takes out Aether Vial for more copies of Grist and Unearth. And why is that? If you listen to other Modern podcast type content, maybe you've heard of Spider Space. He's in Aspiring Spike's chat all the time. He has his own Modern podcast, Mishra's Babble. You should go check that out. Him and Fran F. Peluche and Everos, they talk about Modern every 2 weeks or so. But he's a Death and Taxes player, and he'll tell you Aether Vial is really bad in Modern now. You don't have to believe me. People better than me, or at least other people, think it as well. But why is Aether Vial bad right now? There's Prismatic Ending, which we don't have pulled up here, but Prismatic Ending is a new card from Modern Horizons 2 that can answer any permanent based on converted mana cost, and Aether Vial, basically, they take it out for 1 mana. There's also already Teferis that were bouncing our Aether Vials. There's people playing main deck Prismari commands and all of these blue-red polymorph lists, and there's also people playing Kolaghan's Command out of the sideboard in their Jund lists. But another thing about it is just the speed that you mentioned. Not only can they answer this Aether Vial more easily, but with the hyper efficient threats out there, you often, by the time your Aether Vial gets to 3 or 4 mana, or not even just necessarily damage threats, but combos, by the time your Aether Vial would be at 3 or 4 mana, you're either already dead, or you're at such a low life total that you're really walking a tightrope. And you're not necessarily going to win those games once you start vialing in ringleaders on 4. So what I've done with this list is I've removed Aether Vials. I have 2 less ringleaders, or yeah, 2 less than the max, I guess, ringleaders, because you can't really get to 4 mana as easily and have it be effective. A lot of the goblins we find aren't even effective anyway in those situations, but games are just ending a lot faster. And I've replaced the Aether Vials with Unearth. So we're going to talk about Unearth real quick. Unearth says return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can also cycle it for 2, and it only costs 1 black mana. So all of our important cards for the combo are less than, or 3 mana or less, and Goblin Matron, which can find us other pieces of the combo, is also 3 mana or less. So now when you play your Snoop on turn 2, you can unearth it when they kill it, and maybe you can unearth it and do something else in that turn. Maybe you play a Matron and that gets killed, and now you have a 1 mana tutor, which is pretty crazy. So Unearth has just been really strong, especially with Grist, which, by the way, it's a Planeswalker, but you can unearth Grist because it's technically a 1/1 insect in every other zone but the battlefield. So Unearth is filling Aether Vial's role of consistency for the combo, sort of protecting it. Aether Vial did it by making it instant speed with flash, making it harder to interact with, and just like making it deadly in that you can do it on a moment's notice or even with 1 land in play sometimes. But as that became less reliable, this other angle of Unearth, I think, has been performing better, for me at least. I think going forward, until something changes, I don't think I want to be playing Aether Vial, even though, you know, in the best case scenario, Aether Vial makes 10 mana over the course of a game, but it's very hard to get there. It just doesn't really happen anymore. Just not the way games are turning out. And it's unfortunate, but I do think that like this way forward is a little bit better. I have a couple interesting things in the sideboard that kind of hit on all the same points as everybody else before. We have the same Blood Moons. We have Chalice here for the Cascade decks and for things like Storm or whatever. Sometimes you put it on 1, sometimes you put it on 0 for Cascade. It's pretty versatile. I'm only playing 2. Maybe you want 4. I don't really like the card that much. It doesn't really completely lock out any of the decks we really want it against. They can usually deal with it, so you don't want to go all in on that plan, in my opinion. Another interesting thing you can do, what I like doing, I actually bring this in against Elementals and Ephemerate decks, because a lot of their value just comes from the card Ephemerate, which is a 1 mana card that blinks their stuff twice. And like, if you can shut off Ephemerate for any amount of time, you have a chance to really bully them out of the game. And then the only real new innovation here, I would say, is Crime Punishment. I actually stole this from Darkest Mage. He suggested this for Jund decks because it doesn't kill Wrenn and 6 when you play it, whereas Engineered Explosives does. But the reason I like Crime Punishment so much, and you can see there's 2 cards here. It's a split card from, I think it's Guild Pact, one of those original Ravnica sets. We're only playing this half, which is destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted mana cost X. If you play this on X equals 0, not only does it kill all tokens, it kills all Chalice of the Voids, whatever. It also kills Urza's Saga. So something that Engineered Explosives doesn't do is when you do it on 0, you can only deal with the constructs from Urza's Saga. This, if they play it out, you know that even if they left mana open for their construct, you're going to get both that and the land. And that's something I really like. It also kills Torpor Orb when you pump 2 more mana into it. It deals with a lot of problem permanents that maybe you couldn't deal with Engineered Explosives, but they're pretty similar. This is just what I happen to use. And, you know, it's good against rhinos, as good as you can be against rhinos, in that take out all of them. But any tokens, you can kill Pithing Needles with it. It's pretty versatile. I do bring it in against some of the aggressive red decks because, you know, on one board wipe, sometimes you just blow them out there. But it's a really neat card that I would definitely recommend picking up, just because of its versatility against Urza's Saga. So then, you know, going back to Jay's list, here's Jay's take on a list without Aether Vial in it. And he's got Pyre of Heroes back in it, and also this Unearth. What cuts did you make here to make room for all this? That's what I'm interested in. And have you taken this list out yet, or is this just what you're looking to play?
This is what I'm looking to play. So it's still, you know, open to change.
Yeah.
I really like the Grist in the deck. I did drop it down to 2. I don't know if that's the correct decision or not, but I know I really wanted 2 Pyre of Heroes in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also cut another Goblin. So those are the 2 main changes I made in order to fit in those 2 Pyre Heroes. So Grist, I mean, I really like Grist. If you just click on the card,
Yeah.
just to pop up all the abilities on Grist. Yeah, so not only is it a 1/1 like he was saying in every zone except for the battlefield, but if you look at the +1, so you're basically milling the top of your library. If you have a Snoop out, that is a very efficient way to get the exact card that you need with your Snoop.
Yep.
Or if it's another Goblin and you can't cast it just yet, if you have Unearth, then that's another great way to get a cheap Goblin out for 1 black mana. -2, that is very useful for our deck, just because we don't have ways of answering stuff that's like 6/6 or 7/7 flying. But this card gives us a way to answer those massive creatures that are just beyond the range of our munitions experts. And also it hits planeswalkers. So if there's a Teferi on the board and you need to get rid of it, and if you leave it out, it just takes over game. But with Grist, it gives you a fighting chance to just take out that planeswalker. So it's got a lot of versatility, and of course the -5. It's, you know, that also comes up. You just do 2+1s, and sometimes -5. That's going to win you the game. So
Yeah.
I really like the flexibility of Grist, and that all of its abilities are relevant for what we're trying to do, and for just it basically adds a lot of value compared to other planeswalkers that are printed in the modern for our
Oh
particular
yeah,
deck.
for sure. And it's really interesting that all 3 of us, I'm gonna try and pull up his list again. I gotta find it. Harrison, you and I have sort of converged on this shell that has at least some number of Grists in it, and maybe Pyre of Heroes or Unearth, depending on how you want to get your value.
Yeah, it's interesting how, I mean, like, you look at our list and there are just so many. I mean, we both, all 3 of us, kind of start out with like 30 or so of our I'd say around 30 of our non-lands kind of already set for us. We're all playing
Mhm.
4 Ignoble, we're all playing 4 Snoop. I think we're all playing at least 3 Munitions Expert, all 4 Boggarts, all 4 Matrons, at least I think 2 Ringleaders, except for that last list that Jbrumbaugh showed. 2 Sling Gang, 2 Kiki Jiki, and like that part of the deck has kind of been, we've all decided that that's what the deck is. Like that is what that's what's good. But then there's these 7 slots that we keep moving around, testing different things in.
Yeah.
and you sort of touched on this earlier, like you know, the Goblins is a good deck to play because like one of the best things about playing Goblins is you can kind of try out so many different things. There's a lot of different directions you can go with the deck. There's a lot of different cards you can test out and play.
Yeah, and depending on what your meta is, you really it's very intimidating, which is part of the reason we're making this video, because you more than most decks, I would say, because you have the ability to tutor so many cards up with Goblin Matron and really swing a lot of matchups by just including maybe one Masked Vandal in your sideboard or something like that. There's a lot of Goblin answers out there that you can put into your sideboard to deal with things. Um, you're really constructing your whole 75, and you're playing with whatever cards are in your main deck or that you've boarded in all at once, because you do tutor so often, either with Goblin Matron or Pyre of Heroes. So there's a lot of crazy lines. There's a ton of value to be had. It's I won't say it's like the most difficult deck to play, because it's not even important how difficult it is, but there's a lot of freedom and creativity you have with not just building the deck, but playing the deck, and finding how you want to navigate the game is a big part of it. Well, you were saying that we all settled on 3 to 4 Boggart Harbingers. When I play 4 Boggart Harbingers because I want to maximize, my matchup against combos and just my oops, I kill you type things. But if you're comfortable with more mid-range stuff and you don't think the combo is likely, cutting down to 3 here like Jbrumbaugh does, like that makes sense. It's viable for sure. And you can lean on the rest of your deck, and 3 is enough to find Harbingers. Just you will see it in your opening hand. Can't remember what percent less, but a little bit less often. And I've chosen not to do that, and I go all the way up to 3 on Grist because I'm trying to get those openers that are lightning fast ignoble hierarch into Grist, or lightning fast conspicuous Snoop into Harbinger, and like that's kind of where I'm focused, because I think, like we were mentioning, Modern is hyper fast, hyper efficient right now, and we're a deck that sort of tries to go over the top of people if we're not sneaking in a win with combo. So we kind of have to do what we can to at least get on the board early, force them to deal with us so we can maybe grind them out later or something like that. So I think, looking to the future, I think it's definitely hopeful for Goblins. I think we're actually in a great spot in the meta right now, how everybody's playing it. There are some real nightmare matchups, but when control is big, Goblins is good. It's always going to be that way just because of the way it operates. It's embarrassing for them to have to spend Supreme Verdicts on just one little Mog War Marshal or something like that, but you can force them into that situation pretty commonly. When Living End and combo decks are big, we're going to be good. I think we're all trying to figure out, and it's not just us, it's the rest of Modern as well. We're trying to figure out how to deal with the new free elementals and Ragavan, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Murktide Regent. A lot of people are calling for bans. Probably is not going to happen anytime soon. So we're just all looking for the answers. There are a couple places I look to for inspiration, though, as to like how to deal with that. There's, for people who are interested in it, Aspiring Spike, obviously most prolific Modern streamer. He's responsible for a huge number of the decks that people play in the first place. He has this Jund Sacrifice list, which is very similar to our own list, although it doesn't look like it at first glance. You can see he's got Unearth in his deck. He's got Grists in his deck. He's got, obviously, Ragavan and Noble Hierarch, which we don't have. But there's, believe it or not, a lot of these are sort of, there's a, like, analogous to the cards that we're playing, in that he has these cards that you can play very early to take over the game. And he's got Seasoned Pyromancer instead of Ringleader for card advantage. And he's got Mayhem Devil, Mayhem Devil instead of like Munitions Expert. So a lot of this is sort of almost the same, but you know, obviously you pilot it differently. But the point I'm making is when you look how he's dealing with the rest of the meta at his sideboard, you can see a lot of the same things. There's the color merge pool from before. He decides to bring in Fulminator Mage just because of his style, but that's where our Blood Moon effects come in. The two Chalice of the Void, Void Mirror type effects, and the Graveyard Hate. They happen to be able to leverage Endurance because they have more green spells than us, but maybe we'll be there eventually. But for right now, we're on Leyline of the Void. So when you're constructing your sideboard, like, don't just look to the Goblins list. Look to other things, and to even to bring that a little further out. This happens to be the same colors, but I said 5 color elementals was our cousin before because they're another tribal deck. Now this one isn't specifically about sideboarding, but to see the direction that really good players like Canister have taken with the deck by removing Aether Vial and adding these 3-mana planeswalkers, and you know, their own ramp, it kind of gives you a clue of maybe what you need to do as a tribal deck to operate in this same restrictive meta of hyper efficient mid-range and combo decks. So I guess we could open it up to discussion, but I don't know if there's more. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. If people have questions, we could go there and we can go on all night. But maybe we're wrapping up. Are there anybody that wants to raise their hand in the Discord just to even flex that feature out?
Or yeah, you can raise your hand in the what is it called, Discord stage, or you can type in Zam's chat.
Yeah, I'm reading all of it. But thank you everybody, just first of all, for coming out and listening.
Definitely.
I'm just gonna post this. I'm gonna chop it up, put it on YouTube so that you don't necessarily have to watch all of it.
All 1.5 hours.
Yeah. But it's been like really enlightening, like hearing people talk about, you know, their
we have
struggles
a
and matchups.
My bad.
What's that?
We had a raised hand in the Discord. Right, I'm inviting Goblin to speak.
Goblin. All right, as soon as you get on stage, let us know your thoughts. You're muted and deafened, but sort that out. Maybe he just wants to get on stage.
Can you hear me?
How's it going, Goblin?
Yep.
Yeah. Hello?
Yo.
Hey, so I kind of joined stream a little late, but my question was, have we thought about collected company?
Yeah,
build?
so you'll notice the spike list I pulled up before had collected company. I could go off about collected company for a minute. If you could mute the stream in the background, so it's
we're hearing an echo.
So collected company is an interesting Magic card. It's obviously very powerful. I'll read it for a second so that we all know what we're talking about. You look at the top 6 cards of your library. You put 2 creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and you put the rest of them on the bottom of your library in any order. So our deck, I mentioned before that Unearth was good because we have a lot of creatures that are 3 or less. This card, Collected Company specifically, shines when the creatures you're getting are at a really good rate for 3 mana. And I think the issue with Collected Company from most Goblins builds, and that's not to say there isn't one out there that we haven't found yet, but the issue is that Goblins in general are really bad on rate. We have 3 mana 2/1s and 3 mana 1/1s and 3 mana 2/2s and things that are not necessarily going to be good when you hit them off of Collected Company the same way that Skyclave Apparition might be, or even something like out of Elves, the Shaman of the Pack, which, you know, draining 2 life, just 2 is already, you know, it's decent. So Collected Company doesn't shine in our deck as easily because of that. Now, is it maybe better than Unearth? It's possible. Like it could be, but Collected Companying into Mogwar Marshal and Skirk Prospector is like not really impressive, and it's got even Collected Companying into Snoop and Munitions Expert can be pretty lackluster on some board states. Now you get one of your combo pieces in play, but for 4 mana, it's tricky because a lot of our combo prowess is that it comes out fast, and yeah, we want to flood the board, but some of our more expensive 3 mana cards like Chieftain, War Chief, they're just not exciting. Like they're really good synergistically, but when you don't get to pick which one you're getting, and they're not great on rate in the first place, it's tough. But if there's older versions of the deck, like Grumgully versions of the deck that operate better with Collected Company because you don't need haste to get your combo off with that. But those combos, they actually are not 2-card combos the way Snoop Harbinger is. They're 3-card combos, so they're like you're kind of gimping your combo to maybe get a little bit more value, but you're making it harder to set up. Some ask the question, is Coco better than Ringleader? Obviously, they both go in the 4-drop slot. That's what invites the comparison, and they both kind of draw cards. In this meta, it's possible that Coco is better than Ringleader, but some of the strengths of Ringleader that really shouldn't be forgotten is that you can tutor it up with Matron, so you find it when you do need it. You can play it off the top with Conspicuous Snoop, so it's free cards. And like it's very difficult for us to find our non-goblin spells later in the game because we don't actually draw cards in our deck. Like that's something to really think about with us in general. So the only way to draw cards is to just keep the game going longer.
Yeah.
And
And
so if you're confident you can get the game going longer in the first place, maybe there's better, more reliable answers like bidding. But Coco is certainly something that you could explore. Just the reason it hasn't worked yet is the rate problem that I've mentioned.
yeah, I think there's a very high I definitely agree with everything you've been saying, and the high ceiling of getting like doing it on the end step, getting a Snoop and like a creature, and then the next turn or Snoop and Harbinger even, because then you could do
Yeah.
that on the upkeep.
Yeah.
That will sometimes just win the game, and that angle is good. But the times when you flip 3 lands, a Mogwar Marshal, Skirk Prospector, and Pashlik Mons, like you're not really getting much there. Like you're like the decks that really utilize um, Coco to its full effect, like Spirits, where you already have a lot of creatures that are good at instant speed, and you can really capitalize on playing on the other person's turn and establishing a huge board in the air at a moment's notice. This is where that card shines, and Goblin simply doesn't have that explosiveness because we're not the historic deck that's playing 8 Haste Lords. And if you do want to retool the deck to accommodate more Coco, play style, you could definitely do that. But I think at least in a deck that looks anything like what we have right now, I just don't think it fits.
But I'm scrolling through and there's like not even Coco decks in the meta, so maybe there's another reason. But like Heliod Company was a combo deck that used to play Collected Company. It's fallen out because it's kind of not fast enough. Like it sounds crazy, but because they were capable of turn 3 comboing as well, but it's a little bit rarer than ours. They were playing it, but they have some like serious, like real value hits that can't be dealt with in the form of Skyclave Apparition,
Yeah.
Ranger Captain, which is a 3/3 for 3, which isn't above rate on its body, but then it also does the whole tutor thing that we do. They have Heliod, which is really hard to remove. They have Auriok Champion, which is really hard to remove. They have a lot of Coco value that we don't get just because of the rate problem I mentioned. Like Cocoing into 1/1s that, it's just tough. It's possible. It's possible that, and I hope it's really not the case, but it's possible that we need to be going so heavy, like turbo into combo, that, yeah, just having something that looks through the top 6 cards for Snoop and Harbinger and maybe puts them into play is where we should be. But I don't actually think we're there yet, just because we're consistent enough on the other combo fronts, and then that actually is not good versus this extremely heavy removal of the blue, red, black, red, all those types of Ragavan, Murktide decks that are kind of dominating them, even Rhino. We just, our stuff won't survive after cocoing into it, and that's not the problem that humans or spirits or Heliod have to deal with, and we do. So yeah, just getting the threats into play. Maybe Coco's not the best, but it's, again, the reason you might want to play it is just because it's so important to keep digging, and it gets them right into play, whereas Ringleader just puts them into your hand. But that was a good question. Thank you for that. Is there anything else we want to touch on before wrapping this up? Has that Coco question sparked anything? Any of your brain?
Not for me. I think
Yeah,
I think we covered a lot of really good stuff today.
yeah,
And
I think so
thank
too.
you for everyone who tuned in.
Yes, thank you everybody who tuned in. Thank you Jay, and thank you Harrison. Harrison set this all up, so big thanks to him. I'm glad we could get this out there. As the meta shifts, maybe we'll have something important to bring up. Going forward, my recommendation would obviously be this list that I pulled up. I guess Harrison and Jay have their own list. Here's Jay's, just for like that last screenshot for you guys. We're pretty much on the same page here with Pyre. If you can't give up your vials for Unearths, you'd stick with Harrison's list with the 4 Aether vials. But yeah, maybe, I guess the big change is you should try out Grist, because it kills Murktide Regent. It kills Murktide Regent. It kills Omnaths. It kills a lot of things. It kills Dragon's Rage Channeler every time. It's not just not like conditional. So yeah. Anyway, thank you everybody. Guess we're just gonna cut it here. So thanks for joining. Join us on the Goblins Discord. Going.
Yeah. Oh, there's probably going to be some more events. I don't know if we can get some 8-whack people talking about that deck. I know that there's a few less levels to that, but I recently joined the mod team, and I'm interested in bringing some more spicy fun stuff to the server. So yeah, join if you haven't already, and if you are already here, look forward to some fun stuff to come.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again for organizing this, Harrison. Yeah, it's been a good chat.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. Thank you to everyone who listened in. Thank you to all our YouTube viewers who are listening right now. Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. See you next time.